The mailbox made a soft metal sound. Just once. Enough to pull her attention away from the sink. Arohi Malhotra wiped her hands on a towel, walked to the gate, and saw an envelope resting there. Thin, unremarkable, dangerous in a way she could not explain. No return address. No stamp she recognized. Only her name, written carefully, like someone was afraid of making a mistake. She stood still. Longer than necessary. 8 years earlier, her daughter Anaya had vanished. One afternoon, one ordinary day, and nothing about life had been ordinary since. Arohi picked up the envelope. Her fingers trembled, not from fear, from recognition. Inside was a single folded page. Lined paper, torn from a notebook. 3 words, only 3. I am here. No signature, no explanation, no plea for help, just presence. Arohi sat down on the steps. The world kept moving. A scooter passed. Someone laughed nearby. But for her, time folded inward. She read the words again and again, looking for hidden meaning, for instructions, for proof this was real. I am here. Not I'm safe. Not come find me. Not I miss you. Just existence. For 8 years, people had asked her to accept silence, to make peace with not knowing, to move forward. But silence had never felt empty to her, felt occupied. She whispered, Anaya? No answer came, but the paper felt warm, like it had been held for a long time. Before we go further, pause for a second. If stories about missing truths, quiet courage, and slow investigations matter to you, tap like, subscribe, and share this story, not for views, for remembrance, because stories like this don't shout. They wait. Arohi stood up, walked back inside, and placed the letter on the dining table. The same table where Anaya had done homework. The same corner where her school bag once rested. She called the local police station. I received a letter, she said. Her voice was steady. Too steady. From whom? The officer asked. My daughter, Arohi replied. She's been missing since 1995. A pause. Long. Careful. Ma'am, the officer said gently. We'll log it. But letters like these are often. I know, Arohi interrupted. But this one is different. What makes you say that? She looked at the paper again. Because she didn't ask for help, she said. She stated a fact. The officer hesitated. Then, please come in tomorrow. That night, Arohi didn't sleep. She remembered Anaya's habit of stating things plainly. No drama. No extra words. I finished. I'm ready. I'm here. At dawn, a quiet realization settled in. What if the message wasn't about survival? What if it was about responsibility? What if Anaya wasn't reaching out to be saved, but to be seen? Arohi folded the letter carefully, placed it in her bag. Outside, the day began like any other. Inside her, everything had already changed. And somewhere far away, someone was waiting to see if 3 words were enough to reopen a truth that was never meant to stay buried. The next morning, a second letter surfaced, addressed to a woman who had already stopped hoping. The police station smelled like paper and old fans. Arohi sat across the desk, hands folded, eyes fixed on the letter. Inspector Varma read it once, then again, then placed it down carefully, as if the words might move. 3 words, he said quietly. That's all. Yes, Arohi replied. She never wasted words. Varma leaned back. Cases like this lived in his bones. Unsolved. Uncomfortable. Ma'am, he said, choosing his tone. People send false letters. Sometimes for attention. Sometimes to hurt. I know, Arohi said. But this isn't cruelty. Cruelty explains too much. This explains nothing. That made him pause. The letter had been posted from another state. A small town. Not famous. Not busy. Varma tapped the postmark. This location, he said. means something to you? Arohi nodded slowly. Anaya once told me, she said, if she ever got lost, she'd stay where people don't look. The inspector didn't respond. He wrote that down. Across the city, another woman was folding laundry. Her name was Kavita Rao. She had stopped checking the mailbox years ago. Her daughter, Mira, had disappeared the same summer. Different city, different circumstances, same age. Kavita believed in endings, not because she wanted to, but because she had to survive. That afternoon, her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost ignored it. Almost. Hello, Mrs. Rao, the voice said. This is Inspector Varma. I'm calling regarding your daughter. Silence swallowed the room. I've already answered everything, Kavita said. There's nothing left. There may be, Varma replied. Did you ever receive a letter? Kavita closed her eyes. No, she said. Why would I? Because 3 years ago, she had a scrap of paper, no return address, 3 words. She had burned it, not out of anger, out of fear, fear of reopening a wound she barely kept closed. I'm asking, Varma continued, because another mother did. Kavita's breath caught. What did it say? She asked, already knowing. Varma hesitated, then said it. I am here. The phone slipped from Kavita's hand. The words echoed. Exact. Unchanged. She whispered, oh no. That evening, Arohi received a call. There's another mother, Varma said. She received the same message. Years ago, Arohi didn't smile, didn't cry. She simply said, she wasn't alone. 2 messages. Same words. Different times. Not coincidence. Not madness. Pattern. Late that night, Arohi sat at her table, staring at the letter. What if I am here didn't mean location? What if it meant together? What if survival wasn't solitary? Somewhere, 2 girls had learned the same sentence, chose the same restraint, not screams, signals. A truth pressed gently, then firmly. Sometimes, hope doesn't shout, coordinates. Arohi picked up her phone, typed a message to an unknown number. Did your daughter write in short sentences? The reply came minutes later. Yes. Another message. Did she avoid asking for help? A pause. Then, yes. Arohi closed her eyes. The realization arrived silently, like dawn. This wasn't a cry for rescue. It was confirmation. Someone was alive. Someone was watching. Someone was waiting for the right mind to understand. And now that understanding had begun, the waiting would end. But the next discovery wouldn't come from a letter. It would come from a map no one had thought to connect. The map lay open on the table. Not dramatic, just paper, folds, faint creases. Inspector Varma traced a finger across it. Slow, deliberate. 2 disappearances, 2 different states, 2 different families. Yet something refused to stay separate. Arohi sat beside him. Kavita joined through a video call, her face pale, eyes alert in a way grief sharpens them. Look here, Varma said, tapping a small town. This is where both letters were mailed from. Kavita leaned closer to her screen. I've never been there, she said. Neither has Arohi, Varma replied. That was the problem. The town was not important by itself. No family connections. No known travel history, but both messages passed through it. Years apart. Same phrasing. I am here. No names. No dates. Varma exhaled. When people fake letters, he said, they add drama. They ask for money. They leave clues. These didn't, Arohi said softly. They didn't need to, Kavita added. Silence settled. Then Varma spoke again. There's something else. He pulled out old files. Yellowed edges. Handwritten notes. Both girls, he said, were last seen near roads that connect to highways. Not major ones. Secondary routes. Arohi felt her stomach tighten. Someone passing through, she said. Yes, Varma replied. Someone who didn't stay long. Kavita whispered. Someone who learned timing. The room felt smaller. They reviewed witness statements. Old memories. Fragments people once dismissed. A shopkeeper remembered a man asking for directions. A neighbor recalled a parked vehicle. Engine running. Radio low. At the time, nothing had seemed urgent. Years later, everything sounded louder. What about motive? Kavita asked. Varma paused. Not ransom, he said. No demands. No contact until now. Arohi looked at the letter again. She didn't write "save me," she said. She wrote, "I am here," like she was reporting in. Reporting. The word settled uncomfortably. Like someone taught her to be precise, Varma said. A realization flickered. What if, Arohi said slowly, they were told not to write more? Kavita's voice dropped. What if more words were dangerous? No one answered, because everyone was thinking the same thing. Control doesn't always shout. Sometimes it edits. Varma stood and walked to the board. He wrote 3 words. Here. These words, he said, don't reveal fear. They reveal strategy. Arohi felt a strange mix of pride and pain. Her daughter had learned patience, constraint, survival without noise. That night, Arohi couldn't sleep. She imagined 2 girls, older now, learning rules they never agreed to. Don't attract attention. Don't leave traces. Don't ask questions out loud. Just wait. In another city, Kavita opened a box she hadn't touched in years. Inside were things she never threw away. A bracelet, a school photo, and something else. A memory she had buried. A day, long ago, when her daughter had said, "If I ever disappear, don't assume I'm gone." At the time, Kavita had laughed. Now, her hands shook. She called Arohi. "I remembered something," she said. "My daughter hated asking for help." Arohi closed her eyes. "So did mine," she replied. 2 mothers. One understanding. Somewhere between fear and hope, a silent realization formed. The girls hadn't escaped. They had endured. And endurance, when shared, leaves patterns. The next clue wouldn't come from the past. It would come from someone who was never meant to be noticed. The lead didn't come from a file, or a database, or a computer screen. It came from a voice that hesitated. Inspector Varma received the call late evening. A man in his 60s, soft-spoken, apologetic. "I'm not sure this matters anymore," the man said. "But you asked us to remember." His name was Raghavsan, a former roadside mechanic. He had worked near the secondary highway years ago, summer of the disappearances. "I didn't think it was strange then," Raghav said. "But now, I keep thinking about it." Varma put the call on speaker. Arohi and Kavita listened. "There was a man," Raghav continued, "who stopped often. Always polite, always calm, never rushed." "What did he drive?" Varma asked. "A light-colored van," Raghav said. "Clean. Too clean for long travel." Arohi's breath slowed. "Was he alone?" Kavita asked. Raghav paused. "No," he said. "Not always." Silence thickened. "Sometimes," he added, "I heard voices inside. Girls, I think. Quiet, like they were told to be. No shouting, no crying, just presence. I asked once," Raghav said, "if everything was okay." He smiled and said, "They're shy." Varma closed his eyes briefly. "At the time," Raghav said, "I believed him. No one blamed him. That was the hardest part. Monsters don't always announce themselves. Some blend in. The description matched nothing specific. No license plate, no name, but the behavior mattered. Control without force. Silence without chains." Arohi spoke quietly. "My daughter used to say," she said, "that the most dangerous rules are the ones you agree to follow." Because they feel safe. Kavita nodded. Varma wrote one word on the board. Isolation. If someone removes every reference point, he said, people stop questioning reality. No bruises, no alarms, just a rewritten normal. That night, Varma dug into old property records, rural areas, places that didn't change ownership often. One listing stood out. A farmhouse, purchased just before the first disappearance. Sold quietly years later. No noise, no complaints. Arohi stared at the screen. That's not hiding, she said. That's settling. Kavita swallowed. Like he wasn't afraid of being found. Because he didn't think he would be. The realization settled heavy. This wasn't chaos. It was structure. Someone had built a life on certainty, on control, on replacement. Varma leaned back. If the letters were sent recently, he said, something changed. Age, Arohi replied. Or confidence. Or fear, Kavita added. Because control weakens with time. Memory cracks. Routine slips. Sometimes, the ones who wait the longest are the ones who act last. Arohi looked at the letter again. I am here, not past tense. Not pleading. Present. She felt it then. A quiet truth. This wasn't the end of silence. It was the beginning of response. And response brings consequences. But when investigators finally approached the place on the map, they realized the truth wasn't hidden behind locked doors. It was living in plain sight. The farmhouse sat exactly where the map said it would. White walls, peeling paint, a narrow road leading up to it. No warning signs, no fences, just quiet. Inspector Varma stopped the car a few meters away. Arohi and Kavita stayed back, watching through the windshield. This place doesn't look abandoned, Kavita whispered. It never was, Varma replied. The front door was closed. Not chained, not sealed. Varma knocked. Once, then again. Nothing. He pushed gently. The door opened. No creak. No resistance. Inside, the air smelled clean. Too clean. Furniture was arranged neatly. Plates stacked. Curtains drawn just enough to let light in. This isn't a hiding place, Arohi said softly. It's a routine. They stepped inside. On the wall, a calendar hung. Years old. Certain dates were circled. Not birthdays. Not holidays. Intervals. Training schedules. Varma murmured. In the next room, there were 2 beds. Not child-sized anymore. Adult. Lived in. Kavita pressed a hand to her mouth. They grew up here, she said. Not imprisoned. Contained. A shelf held books. Simple language. Rules underlined. Don't attract attention. Stay calm. Follow routine. Control. Disguised as care. In the kitchen, a radio sat on the counter. Always tuned to the same station. Noise without information. Arohi noticed something else. A small box. Locked. This, she said. This is where hope hides. Varma forced it open. Inside were envelopes. Unsent. Dozens of them. Each with a name. Different. Some crossed out. Only 2 were clean. Arohi's. Kavita's. Kavita sank into a chair. So many others, she whispered. Varma shook his head. Names researched, he said. Options evaluated. Not all chosen. This was selection. Arohi picked up one envelope. Inside, a single page. 3 words. Practiced again and again. In different handwriting stages. Learning. Perfecting. I am here. Arohi felt something break open. They weren't allowed to say more, she said. But they were allowed to exist. That's what control had offered. Survival, at the cost of voice. Outside, a sound broke the stillness. Footsteps. Someone approaching. Varma signaled them back. A man appeared at the doorway. Older now. Gray at the temples. Calm expression. He smiled, as if returning home. You shouldn't be here, he said evenly. Varma stepped forward. You don't get to decide that anymore. The man looked around, then sighed. They were safe, he said. They learned discipline, purpose. Arohi's voice shook. You stole their choices. The man met her eyes. No, he replied. I removed chaos. Silence stretched. Then he added, they chose to stay. The words landed heavy, because somewhere, deep down, Arohi knew the hardest truth. When survival is offered with rules, choice becomes complicated. The man was taken away. No struggle, no denial. As the sun lowered, Arohi stood in the doorway. This place had not been hidden. It had been ignored, because it looked ordinary. And ordinary is where silence survives best. But the girls were no longer here, and what they had chosen to become would change everything that came next. The rooms were empty now, not abandoned, just finished. Beds made, shelves clean, no signs of panic. They left willingly, Varma said quietly. Arohi felt a strange resistance rise in her chest. Not denial, understanding. They weren't running, she replied. They were moving on. Files confirmed it later. Bank withdrawals. New identities. Carefully built. Whoever controlled that place had prepared them for independence. Not freedom. Function. Kavita sat on the farmhouse steps. Hands clasped. Eyes distant. I used to imagine saving her, she said. Pulling her away. Bringing her home. She laughed softly. She doesn't need saving, does she? Arohi didn't answer immediately, because the truth arrived slowly and stayed. Rescue assumes helplessness, but endurance changes people. In the following weeks, authorities searched quietly, not manhunts, not public alerts, because sometimes being found isn't what people want. A letter arrived at the station. No envelope this time, just a note left on a desk. 3 words. I am ready. Different handwriting. Same restraint. Varma read it twice, then folded it. They know we're here, he said. Arohi felt no panic, only clarity. She's telling us, she said, that the story has changed. Another letter arrived. Days later, 2 words this time. Thank you. Nothing more. No reunion. No dramatic meeting. Just permission. Kavita cried that night. Not from loss. From release. She survived without me, she said. And that hurts less than I thought. Arohi stared at the window. Motherhood, she realized, is not ownership. It's witnessing. The farmhouse was sealed. Records archived. The man sentenced quietly. No headlines. No spectacle. Because the girls had chosen silence. And silence, when chosen, is not absence. Months passed. Arohi returned to her routines. Different now. Lighter. One morning, at a crowded station, a young woman brushed past her. Their eyes met, just for a second. No recognition. No tears. Only a look that said, I see you. That was enough. Arohi didn't turn around. Didn't call out. Because some reunions are not meant to be claimed. They are meant to be respected. Years later, when the truth finally surfaced publicly, people asked one question that had no easy answer. Was silence a prison or a choice? The documentary aired years later. Late night. Low volume. Careful wording. No faces shown. No names spoken. Just a question. Repeated softly. Asterisk, were they taken? Or did they stay? Asterisk. People argued. Experts debated. Comments filled with certainty. Arohi didn't watch it all. She didn't need to. She had lived the answer. At a small cafe, she met Kavita again. Same table. Different weight. They're calling it a psychological case study, Kavita said, stirring her tea. Control systems. Conditioned choice. Arohi nodded. They want clean definitions, she said. But life isn't clean. Kavita looked up. Do you ever wonder, she asked, if we should have tried harder? The question hung. Arohi answered slowly. I wonder if trying harder would have meant listening less. Silence followed. That silence wasn't empty. It was respectful. Across the country, a university hosted a closed seminar. A young woman sat in the back row, hair tied simply, notebook untouched. When the speaker said, "Victims often lose agency," the woman stood up. "Sometimes," she said calmly, "agency adapts." No name given. No explanation offered. She left before questions could form. The room stayed quiet longer than usual. At home, Arohi received an email. No subject line. One sentence. "I learned to choose later than most. But I learned." Arohi didn't reply. Not because she didn't want to, but because replies can pull threads that are meant to stay tied. She printed the message, placed it in a drawer. Some truths don't belong on walls. They belong close. Kavita received a message too. Different words. Same tone. "Please don't look for me. I'm not lost." Kavita smiled through tears. "I won't," she whispered. The world moved on. Stories faded. But something subtle changed. When people spoke about missing children, someone always added, "Sometimes they grow up somewhere else." Not denial. Possibility. Arohi volunteered at a helpline. Not to give answers. To sit with uncertainty. She learned that healing doesn't always come from closure. Sometimes it comes from consent. Consent to let go. But just when the story seemed complete, a final discovery surfaced. One that reframed everything they thought they understood. The discovery didn't come from a confession, or a witness, or a hidden room. Came from paperwork. A junior clerk, sorting decades-old archives, noticed a mismatch. Dates that didn't line up. Signatures that repeated. Transfers that happened too smoothly. Nothing illegal at first glance. Just deliberate. Inspector Varma was called in. Retired now. Reluctant. "I thought this story was done," he said. The clerk slid a folder across the table. Inside were transit records, public transportation, long-distance routes. 2 names appeared. Not real names. Temporary ones. But the handwriting on the forms. Varma recognized it immediately. Not the man from the farmhouse. Someone else. Someone official. "This doesn't make sense," Varma murmured. The records showed assistance. Quiet help. Legal gaps used carefully. Not to trap. To move. Varma felt a cold realization. This wasn't one person, he said. It was a system. A small one. Hidden inside routine. People who believed they were protecting. Redirecting. Managing outcomes. Arohi listened as Varma explained it later. Her face didn't change. "So," she said, "someone decided what was best." "Yes," Varma replied, without asking. That was the unexpected truth. The farmhouse wasn't the beginning or the end. It was a middle point, a place where silence was organized. Arohi thought of the letters, the precision, the restraint, not fear, training. But not all of it was forced. Some of it was chosen. That's what complicated everything. Kavita reacted differently. "They helped her disappear," she said. "They helped her stay gone." "Yes," Varma admitted. Kavita laughed once. Dry. "Then maybe," she said, "the world didn't lose them. It redirected them." The authorities debated reopening the case. Public interest flared briefly. But the women at the center of it did not step forward. No statements, no claims, and that silence was finally respected. Arohi received one last message. No explanation, no history, just a reflection. "When choice was limited, I learned control. When control ended, I learned choice." Arohi read it slowly, then once more. She understood the moral twist then. The story wasn't about disappearance. It was about adaptation, about how humans survive systems, by learning their language, and how silence, when used carefully, can be a bridge instead of a cage. Arohi folded the page. She didn't feel victory or loss. She felt alignment. Some truths don't arrive loudly. They arrive complete. And once they do, nothing more is required. But years later, a small, personal choice by Arohi would quietly reveal what being here truly meant. Arohi didn't expect the invitation. It arrived without ceremony. A simple card. No return address. Just a place, a date, and a line written carefully. You don't have to come, but you can. Arohi held the card for a long time. Not because she was afraid, because she finally wasn't. The place was ordinary. Community hall. Neutral walls. Folded chairs. No cameras. No press. Inside, a small group had gathered. Men, women, different ages. All quiet, all aware. This wasn't a reunion. It was an acknowledgement. A woman stood at the front. Not introduced. Not named. Her voice was calm. "We're not here to explain ourselves," she said. "We're here to decide how much of ourselves we're willing to return." Arohi felt her chest tighten. This was what "I am here" had meant. Not location. Not rescue. Presence. On one's own terms. The woman continued. "Some of us stayed silent to survive. Some stayed silent to protect others. Silence wasn't weakness. It was timing." Arohi didn't look for Anaya's face. She didn't need to. She recognized the cadence. The pauses. They spoke about rules. About structure. About how safety can turn into habit. No accusations. No bitterness. Just clarity. At the end, the woman looked at Arohi. "You raised someone who learned patience," she said. "That patience saved more than one life." Arohi's eyes filled. "Thank you," she replied, "for choosing when to return." The woman nodded. After the meeting, no one exchanged numbers. No promises were made. People left the way they arrived. Quietly, outside, the air felt different. Arohi realized something then. Closure isn't an event. It's a boundary. You don't cross it. You recognize it. At home, Arohi placed the old letters and the new card together. Past, present. Neither demanded explanation. She understood the silent realization fully now. The girls had never been lost. They had been navigating. And navigation, by its nature, is invisible to those who aren't inside it. Arohi turned off the light. For the first time in years, she didn't wait for the mailbox sound. Because being here no longer required proof. But one final detail left behind unintentionally would connect every part of the story into a single irreversible truth. It was small, almost forgettable. Arohi noticed it while cleaning a drawer. An old notebook, thin, corners bent. She didn't remember putting it there. Inside were blank pages, except one. A list. Short lines, written carefully. Not names, not addresses. Rules. Simple ones. Don't rush answers. Silence buys time. Observe before acting. Arohi's breath slowed. These weren't instructions from fear. They were lessons. At the bottom of the page, a sentence stood alone. "Being here doesn't mean staying." Arohi sat down. This was the missing piece. The letters, the restraint, the timing. It had never been about hiding forever. It had been about learning how to move without being pulled back. She showed the notebook to Kavita. Kavita read it slowly, then nodded. "She wasn't waiting for us," she said. "She was preparing herself." That truth changed everything. The farmhouse, the silence, the system, they were all chapters, not the ending. Inspector Varma saw the notebook too. He closed it gently. "This explains why no one broke," he said. "They weren't frozen. They were training. Training to decide. Training to leave." Arohi felt something settle. Guilt loosened its grip. Hope transformed. Motherhood, she realized, is not about keeping someone close. It's about trusting. What you taught will travel with them. Weeks later, the notebook disappeared. Not stolen. Not lost. Returned to where it belonged. Arohi didn't search for it. Some truths don't need to be kept. They need to be lived. One evening, her phone buzzed. A message. No name. Just a line. I stayed long enough to learn. I left when I was ready. Arohi typed a reply. Deleted it. Then simply wrote, I know. She didn't send it. Because knowing was finally enough. Outside, the world moved as usual. Inside her, the story had reached its quiet center. Not resolution. Understanding. The final chapter wouldn't arrive as a message or a meeting. It would arrive years later, in the smallest, most human way possible. It happened on a morning that wasn't special. No date to remember. No reason to be alert. Arohi was standing in line at a bookstore. Old habit. Quiet place. She liked stores where people spoke softly, where silence wasn't awkward. Ahead of her, a young woman placed a book on the counter. The title caught Arohi's eye. Systems of Choice. Not popular. Not easy. The cashier asked, Do you want a receipt? The woman paused. Just a second longer than normal. Yes, she said. Please. Arohi felt it then. Not recognition. Alignment. The woman turned slightly. Their shoulders almost touched. No surprise. No hesitation. Just a calm awareness, like two people sharing weather. The woman spoke quietly, without looking directly at her. Some silences, she said, are temporary shelters. Arohi swallowed. And some, she replied, are doorways. The woman smiled. Not wide, not emotional, grateful. They didn't exchange names. They didn't sit together. They didn't need to. As the woman walked out, she left the receipt behind. Arohi picked it up. On the back, in careful handwriting, 3 words were written. I am free. Arohi closed her eyes. This was the unexpected truth. Freedom didn't arrive with reunions, or apologies, or explanations. It arrived with choice. Later that day, Arohi placed the receipt next to the first letter. I am here. I am free. Beginning. Outcome. She didn't frame them, didn't hide them. She let them exist. That night, she understood the moral fully. Losing someone doesn't always mean they are gone. Finding them doesn't always mean bringing them back. Sometimes love's final responsibility is knowing when to step aside. Outside, the city lights flickered on. Inside Arohi, there was no longing, only peace, because the truth hadn't arrived loudly. It had arrived intact. And intact truths don't demand anything more. The final part reveals why this story was never meant to end with answers, but with acceptance. Years passed, quietly, as years should. The case file gathered dust. Not forgotten, just no longer opened. People still asked Arohi questions sometimes. Careful ones, polite ones. Did you ever get closure? Arohi always paused before answering. Closure was a sharp word. It implied a door being shut. This story, she would say, didn't close. It settled. That confused most people. But it was the only honest answer. Arohi learned that endings are a comfort for witnesses, not always for those who lived inside the story. At a small talk on resilience, a speaker once said, Silence is the opposite of truth. Arohi raised her hand. Sometimes, she said calmly, silence is how truth survives. The room stayed quiet. That was enough. She never searched for Anaya again. Not because she didn't care, but because she finally trusted the care that had already traveled ahead. Motherhood, she realized, is not measured by proximity. It's measured by whether someone can stand alone, without falling apart. On her bookshelf, 2 pieces of paper stayed tucked inside a novel. Not displayed, not hidden. I am here. I am free. One statement of presence. One statement of choice. Together, they told the full story. The unexpected truth was simple. Some disappearances are escapes from noise. Some silences are negotiations with survival. And some people don't return, because returning would mean shrinking into a version of themselves they've already outgrown. Arohi accepted that, not as surrender, as respect. She walked past the mailbox each morning, still noticed the sound, but she no longer waited for it, because being here was never about proof. It was about continuity. Life continued, quietly, intentionally, and that was the ending the story needed. Arohi noticed it one evening, while watering the plants. The habit remained. The waiting didn't. She realized something important then. Letting go wasn't a moment. It was a practice. Every day, you choose not to pull a thread. That could unravel peace. People often imagine grief as loud, crying, breaking, but acceptance is quiet, almost invisible. At the community center, Arohi began mentoring younger women. Not about loss, about boundaries. One girl asked her once, "How do you know when to stop looking?" Arohi didn't answer immediately. "You stop," she said carefully, "when looking becomes about your fear, not their safety." The girl nodded slowly. That answer stayed with her. Across the city, a research paper circulated privately. No headlines, no interviews. It explored a concept few wanted to touch. Voluntary silence after prolonged control. Not compliance. Not denial. A transition. A way to reclaim identity, without rewriting the past. Arohi read the paper once, then closed it. She didn't need academic language to explain lived truth. One afternoon, she received a package. No sender, no note. Inside was a book, well worn, margins filled with notes. The topic was decision-making under pressure. On the inside cover, one sentence was underlined. Freedom is not the absence of influence, but the ability to choose despite it. Arohi traced the words with her finger. She didn't cry. She smiled, because the lesson had completed its circle. What began as silence had become articulation, not spoken aloud, but fully formed. That night, Arohi placed the book on her shelf. Not in the center, not hidden, exactly where it belonged, between stories of loss and stories of growth. She turned off the light. For the first time, the space between past and present felt stable. No tension, no pull, just balance. The final part doesn't reveal a secret or a reunion. It reveals why the story could only end when no one was waiting anymore. The house felt different now. Not emptier, clearer. Arohi noticed it in small ways. The clock ticking didn't bother her. The evenings stretched, but they didn't ache. Waiting had left the room. For years, waiting had been a posture. Leaning forward, listening too hard. Now, her body had learned rest. One afternoon, a neighbor asked casually, "Do you still think about her?" Arohi smiled, softly. "Every day," she said, "but not in the way you mean." Thinking no longer carried urgency, carried warmth. Memory had shifted roles, from wound to witness. At a small gathering, someone brought up the old case, carefully. "They never really solved it, did they?" Arohi took a breath. "They solved the part that needed solving," she replied. The room didn't push for more. That was new. People had learned, slowly, that some stories don't owe explanations. Late that night, Arohi sat by the window. No letter came, no message followed. And for the first time, that absence didn't feel like loss. It felt intentional. She understood the final truth then. Waiting keeps stories open. Acceptance lets them breathe. The girls, women now, had not vanished into nothing. They had stepped into continuity, lives in motion, choices unfolding. And the mothers left behind had done something just as brave. They had stopped pulling the past into the present. That was the moral twist no one talked about. Sometimes love is not holding on. It's not demanding proof. It's not asking for return. Sometimes love is stepping back. So someone else's life doesn't have to circle yours forever. Arohi closed the window. Tomorrow would come. Unremarkable. Whole. And that was the ending. She once thought impossible. Not reunion. Not answers. Peace. Without permission. One last part remains. Not to conclude the story, but to explain why silence was never the enemy. Silence has a reputation. People fear it, distrust it. They say silence hides truth, that it protects wrongdoing. Sometimes that's true, but not always. Arohi learned this slowly, not from books, from living. Silence had once been forced on her, the kind that arrives with unanswered questions, with nights that don't end. That silence hurt, but the silence that followed later was different. It was chosen. Chosen silence doesn't erase truth, protects it from being misused. When the story finally circulated publicly, edited, softened, people asked the wrong question. Why didn't they speak sooner? Arohi wished they had asked instead. What would speaking have cost them? Because every word has a price, and not everyone can afford to pay it safely. The girls had learned that early, not as victims, as observers. They learned when to speak, and when to remain. That skill saved them. Silence became a tool, a boundary, a form of authorship. Arohi saw this clearly now. The farmhouse, the letters, the distance, they weren't symbols of disappearance. They were symbols of control being rewritten. Not loudly, not heroically, patiently. This was the moral people missed. Survival doesn't always look like escape. Sometimes it looks like adaptation, until adaptation turns into choice. And choice, when it arrives quietly, doesn't ask for applause. Arohi stood by the shelf one last time, touched the spine of the book. I am here. I am free. Presence. Autonomy. Nothing else was needed. The story didn't end with answers, because answers belong to questions. And the right question had finally been asked, then released. Silence was never the enemy. Impatience was. In the last moments of this story, we don't look back at what was lost. We look at what was protected. In the end, nothing dramatic happened. No press conference. No final reveal. Just life, continuing the way it always does, when it's allowed to. Arohi woke up early that morning, made tea, watered the plants, the same routine, but it no longer carried weight. She understood now what this story had truly been about. Not disappearance, not mystery, not even survival. It was about protection. Protecting the ability to choose. Protecting identity before it could be reshaped by fear. Protecting silence until it became strength. The girls had protected something rare. The right to define themselves, without being explained, without being owned by tragedy. And the mothers, without realizing it at first, had protected something too. They had protected space. Space for growth. Space for distance. Space for a future that didn't circle the past endlessly. That was the silent realization no report could capture. Love does not always chase. Sometimes it stands still, so someone else can move freely. Arohi stepped outside. The street was ordinary, familiar. She felt no urge to look back, because this story was never meant to return to its beginning. It was meant to move forward quietly. If you're still listening, take this with you. Not every unanswered question is a failure. Not every silence is harm. Some truths survive because they are not forced into daylight before they are ready. Some people survive because they are allowed to choose when they speak and when they don't. That was the ending. Not loss, not reunion. Respect. And respect, once given, does not need an epilogue.